equalization.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Duda, seconded by Kraft. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Boyle, Commissioner Kavanaugh, Commissioner Duda,
Yes.
Commissioner Kraft,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Here.
Commissioner Rogers, Madam Chair.
Yes. We are here for the purpose of discussing 4 parcels of property that were talked about earlier at the Board of Equalization, and here to further discuss those. So, would you guys like to start again and just kind of refresh us as to what you're asking us, and then we'll go from there?
Well, again, I'm Carol White with Lyman Ritchie, 4315 Cumming Street. I did ask our attorney Ron Comas to attend this afternoon in case we get some more technical questions that he can respond to. The reason behind our protests is we feel like we are not being, while we don't agree with the methodology that was used, we certainly don't feel like we are being equalized. And we are, our protests were based on an equalization factor. We're not being equalized with neighbors that could have similar mineral interests under their properties. We're not being equalized with other open bodies of water, and we're not even being equalized with our competitors. So for those reasons, that's why we protested our taxes.
And before we continue, there is a, I think it's in next to Commissioner Kraft there, or not Commissioner, the gentleman, Tim, is that your name?
Yes.
There's a tablet with the sign-in sheet. Is that it?
It's already.
It's already
Here it is.
up here. Okay. If we can just keep that, yeah, if we can keep it going around.
Sure, sure. Okay. I've also passed out to all of you, I presented this morning this kind of spreadsheet showing the comparable properties. I do have the aerial pictures. I didn't make extra copies of those for you guys, but I'm
That's
happy
fine.
to have them. And then also, I did not have the our tax protests. I gave you the front sheets of our tax protests showing the values that we were requesting. That's the attachments that we handed out.
Okay. Dan?
If I may, we guys handed out a legal size spreadsheet that just summarized the 4 parcels, what the 2015 value was, what the 2016 value, well, at the moment what the 2016 value is, and then what the request was from Lyman Ritchie, and then what the BOE referees recommended. So I hope it makes sense. And then as far as the copies of the protests, I know there's some stuff available. I did have staff try to make copies of all 4 protests for everybody, but of course it would go this way today. We're having some copier issues, so Maria's Alcala's coming up as soon as she can, but I just don't have copies of everything ready if there was stuff you guys wanted to see that you don't have right now. So, but we're working on getting that for you.
Okay. So we left off with kind of the conversation about how did we get here, and the change in how they were assessed versus how they're being assessed now. And so, does anybody have any further questions about that piece of it? Commissioner Duda?
If I may, and I don't mean to prolong the conversation too much, but it's interesting. Thank you, Dan Esch, for the spreadsheet. It's interesting to see these figures. Looking at the 4 parcels in question here, 2 of them, the first and the last, took roughly tenfold jumps in their valuation in the last year. And I would be curious to hear from the assessor's office or somebody as to what happened to prompt a jump of that size.
Dan? Jeff? I mean...
Basically, I use
I'm sorry.
discounted cash flow to value the income stream from the sand that's available, and then the reversion of that property after that sand has been removed and it sells for whatever highest best use of itself. Currently, I analyze sales of other properties that sold, large tracts that are lakes, anywhere from 35 cents to 53 cents a square foot.
Okay.
I think we selected 46 as kind of the mid-range for the reversionary part of that. So depending upon
46 cents, you mean?
Yeah, 46 cents
A foot.
So depending upon the amount of sand that's left on that particular parcel and how big it is, what it would sell for at the end, that's why you see the difference in prices. In 2015, the methodology was, I can't even call it a methodology. It was a fraction of ag use value, which clearly it's not ag use. So in my mind, I couldn't value it as ag use.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kraft?
How do you know how much sand is left?
By the aerial photographs. We assume a depth of 20, although they can go as deep as 25, 30, I don't know. That's some of the information we requested from them that we didn't see.
And did that count the sand that was in this pile? The sand they said was unusable
It's-
sand?
It's just a flat measurement of the surface that's left.
And you
from our
assume
visual.
20 foot, but what if it's only 3 additional feet from what they have?
Then if they provide that for us, then we would certainly use that. According to the experts in Nebraska, the average is about 20, or not even the average, the minimum is around 20 along the river.
Commissioner Morgan?
So, are we only talking about 73 acres of land in the spreadsheet Dan did? Is that what that amounts to? It doesn't say how much land is the parcel information, it just says commercial lands.
Right, I don't know, I'd have to.
On my spreadsheet, I have the total of the parcels, and we can total that up real quick. It's-
It comes up to be about 185.
185 acres?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. And now, when you talked about that 23 cents, so we're talking, or let's call it 20 cents, it'd be somewhere around 23,000. How much is it per?
46 cents a square foot.
Okay,
I
so
think
that
what
would
we-
mean you're talking about 23,000 roughly an acre,
Okay?
thereabouts,
Yeah.
is the value.
The reversionary value, but that's discounted, and I looked, we discounted it 25 years.
25 what?
25 years. We gave a 5-year grace period after our preliminary meeting with them.
Okay.
When we met with them in the spring, they told us it would take them at least 5 years after they closed the pit to sell it. So we tacked on an additional 5 years, modified that value based on that discount factor.
You following that, Mark?
No.
Well, you're probably not.
I wasn't either. I thought you maybe had it.
With
So
all
when
due-
you
with all due
discount the
respect,
23,000 an acre in the 5 years, what do you,
25 years.
25 years?
What you're looking for is the present worth of that future value. So you have to discount it
Okay.
for time. It's a mortgage constant, is another term.
It's like evaluating
Yeah.
future cost of money.
Yes.
Okay.
Carol, you got a comment?
Well, I wanted a point of clarification, because you said that you assumed a depth of 20 feet on the parcels, but what did you do with the parcels that are completely mined out? Did you still apply
That's
that
just a-
same income? It
No,
appears
I'm
you
just
applied
measuring
that-
the income that you are receiving off the sand now and into the future, not the sand that you've already sold.
But I
The
believe-
water part of it's valued in the reversion at the end of the 25 years.
Okay, but, so did you
That's what
apply
I'm
an
doing.
income stream at all to 103520012?
Which one? The last one?
Third one down.
Oh, no.
That's the last one down,
The last one.
on the long spreadsheet,
Oh, on your spreadsheet or on this long
on the
one?
long one. On our spreadsheet, it's the first one,
Oh, the first one.
it's 63.48 acres.
Oh.
Oh, this is somebody else's part.
No,
No.
no,
The bottom
it's our
part.
parcel,
The
the
bottom.
LRC parcel,
Those are
that's
shares.
ours.
Oh, okay. Then, yes, we did.
So you applied in, but that's a completely mined out parcel.
Yes, it'd be the reversionary value of that parcel.
But was there an income stream applied to it?
Yes, the reversionary value is part of your income stream. When you sell the property, that's called reversion. That's part of your income. It's discounted for time.
But I guess what I understood is you were applying up to 3 factors on our ground. You were applying an income stream for the royalty, the reversionary when it was done, and then if there was ag ground, you were gonna tack that onto the top of it.
Yes.
So I guess I was asking, was there an income stream for the royalty only on this?
Since you own the land, we assumed a certain percentage for royalty, yes.
Even if the parcel's already completely mined out?
If it was completely mined out, that royalty didn't apply to your income. I'd have to have the worksheet to see it, but no, the reversionary value is probably the only value there, if that's completely mined out. Because what I looked at was just the surface that was left from the aerials.
Dan, then Commissioner Morgan.
Well, I was just going to say, we do have the copies I was speaking of. We do have them here, but I guess I was worried the more paper, the more confusing it might get. But I mean, if, for example, the information the assessor register of deeds would have provided the referee on this particular parcel, we would have a copy of that. But I don't know the length of it, of how, it's probably not easy reading material, but I don't know. I just want to offer that if anyone wanted to see
Okay.
any of the protest information on these parcels, other than just the summary. We do have what was submitted to the referees.
Okay.
So, on both ends, by Lyman Ritchie and the assessor.
Okay.
If some people want that,
Commissioner
we'll get it.
Morgan?
Dan, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm still trying to figure this out, but it looks like, if I look at this one sheet, okay, you have 73 acres and a value of 381,000. So that means that that land is valued currently for 2016, 5,000 an acre roughly,
Okay?
5,200, whatever it is, okay?
Mhm.
That's the value today.
Right. Based on the income stream, yes.
Yeah, and even forgetting income and just say it's just land. I mean,
I can't say forget the income, because the income is going to be what gauges the value on this. You can't take an average of all the values per acre and come up with a methodology to value this thing. You have to, because we're valuing the income stream on it, not the acreage.
but it seems like just land in that area. Larry, you have some
Well,
knowledge of land
Let me
price.
simplify this. The last one of these that sold for 53 cents a square foot after the mine was done.
After.
Yeah. So,
So it's
The
sold
owner
for
of that
5
property-
times what you're talking about.
Yeah,
You have
so-
it at now.
because we're discounting it into the future.
Yeah, that,
And we're not
right.
using the 53 cents, we're using 46. But that property, before it was valued correctly, was probably valued at waste. So was that property that sold for 53 cents a square foot actually waste? You're doing an injustice to those that actually have waste.
The prior approach, if I might try to explain that, under the prior assessor's administration, they would take the land value that you could purchase an acre of ag ground for if you went out there today, and they assumed that as the mining operation progressed, as you're taking land away and trucking it down the road, that acre is declining in value and essentially becomes equivalent to waste until such time as somebody steps up and wants to redevelop it. Somebody has to front the money to get the utilities there, to get it permitted for whatever future use, get access. All of that expense needs to be incurred. And it would be at that point in time that the assessor's office would say, yes, now we realize that there's a change in use, and we would apply a different value to it. That's, I think, the difference in the two methodologies.
Very well
Correct me
said,
if you
yes.
see it different.
No, that's correct.
That's what I'm glad you said that, because that's what I was gonna ask you to do, is explain
Yeah,
the difference
that
between.
methodology and mine is when I read the statute, or the regulation, I'm sorry, it says that once that mine starts, the use changes. So I'm kind of bound by that. So it's no longer ag use at that point. And in Nebraska, every ag acre gets ag use value.
But
So
there's still
Doesn't
a-
matter what class it is, if it's got an ag parcel, or ag use on it, it gets it.
But
So-
there's still a difference between if you're a mine operation that's done
Mhm.
and a mine operation that is currently in operation.
No. Because the
But the
reversion
value-
is what we're after. If it no longer has income coming from the sale of the sand or the royalties for the sand, if it no longer has that income, it still has that reversionary value or what it will sell for. Now, it has to be a sizable lake in order for that to sell as a subdivision. If it's a small tract, it probably sells as a private lake. I don't know. But in the case of this property and the ones that we analyzed, there were 11 total sand pits that we valued. Of those, these are the only ones that have appealed it. And when we looked at the information they brought in the springtime, we did agree that, okay, there is a time where that sits empty or idle for a while. So we had to build in another 5 years to account for that. So I feel that we did that. We went from a 25 or 20-year to a 25-year income stream.
So when I look at this sheet, and I'm sorry, Mary
No,
Ann,
go ahead.
but it looks like the land was valued at $400 to $600 an acre
As
in
waste.
2015.
As waste, yes.
That's where it was. Okay.
And in my opinion, that was incorrectly.
Right, that seems, yeah, no matter what. Now, some of it's lake, I'm assuming, of this, so that's a different situation too. But if it is a decent lake, then it enhances the value of the rest of it. Maybe, like,
But in my job is to analyze what the market's telling me. And the market told me that these things sell for what we decided on, 46 cents a square foot as lake property.
right now.
Yes, right now.
Now, the value that he's using is a sale from 2 years ago, which I believe is Blue Water.
That's one of them, yes.
Yeah, we gave the assessors some information. We had a more recent sale over in Saunders County, but it's the exact same thing. It's, if you're all familiar with Sandy Point or Sandy, Big Sandy over there,
Yeah,
there's another area that just sold in December of 15 below Big Sandy, and that sold for an average of $4,600 an acre.
But again, you're going with an average sale price instead of measuring the income stream and the reversion.
But it's an actual sale.
And then I'd have to verify the sale. I had one of my staff members do that, so I don't know. We did consider it though.
Do our referees have any, and you know, we've heard from, and the only reason I'm asking is because we hire you to look at these, and so I want your,
Basically, I would just reinstate what I said this morning, that our task is to weigh the data brought in by the taxpayer to see if that supports any contradictory valuation the assessor has prepared. This is a very unique property. I certainly would yield to Jack and Mike as far as their expertise on this. Sand pits are pretty specialized. I said our very simple analysis was the property owner came in with unlike properties to compare to theirs, properties that were zoned for ag properties or farm properties, as opposed to their commercial properties. They're not suitable comps. We just denied it based upon unsuitable data.
2 of our comparables were commercial.
Well, there's 9 of them you brought in, man. We just, you know.
which ones were the commercial ones?
The last 2 on my, that's our competitor.
So in the first grouping, it's the last 2 properties.
Okay,
They're both at about 78 acres.
all right.
It's this sheet that we're referring to. And if you just, if you add those 2 together, that comes up to about 3,700 an acre as to what the competitor with commercial property is being assessed at. If the average of the four below, that was a question this morning, which are the Lyman Ritchie properties, the average there is 6,178 an acre.
6,000,
178.
and the other ones were what? 36?
Yeah, 3,681. The average of the other properties in that upper category that were just open water properties, there were 9 of those properties, and they average out to be 3,139.
And those are the ones the assessor or the referees are saying aren't good comparables?
Well, when we get a list of 9 pieces of data, I'll go through and verify the first 2 or 3 or 4. If none of them are reliable, we usually just stop based upon time restrictions.
So these
It's
last,
not our job. We don't have time to sort through every bit of data they want to try to verify 9 pieces when the first 3 or 4 are not reliable.
so the last 2 being the commercial ones weren't really taken into consideration?
Well, none of it was once I determined this was not to be reliable data.
Okay. So now that we do know that these last 2 are the comparable ones,
As far as classification.
as far as classification,
Yeah, we don't know if they're comparable based on the surface area that's available to them yet. In
explain.
other words, if they're mostly sand still, that's why you would see a lesser rate on them, because their income is just now coming on board. I don't know. But out of 78 acres, how much of it is water and how much of it is sand?
We do have those aerial photos. They were part of the presentation this morning. Can you pass those
Yeah,
over?
this is the competitors right here. I would say that almost 3/4 of that is gone. You can see the dredge is coming up here, so that's just the north half of that they're getting. And I would say that this is completely mined out, because they probably started here first, and that's their wasteland pile. So this would be completely mined out, and this would be basically 3/4 mined out.
Yeah, so I would probably have that value for a 10-year, and I say reversion, I should say a sellout. Probably 10 years out, that rate's probably a different rate because of that,
Okay.
because of the difference in size.
But closer,
I'd have to look at my worksheets to see if apples to apples.
Okay.
but then the cost per acre should really be closer to those 2 than it is to the average of
Not
the,
necessarily,
therefore.
because again, you're trying to narrow it down to an acre price, and I'm not valuing it at an acre price, I'm valuing the income stream. And then what the property would sell for at the end of that. Because there's a couple different variables there. If we just ignored all the income and just looked at the sale price of the property at the end of it, then you're looking at 46 cents a square foot. But that's not the entire story.
Because you have income on the front end.
Right. As they take the sand out, it does diminish the value of the land, but they're getting an income from that. So we're measuring that future income for what's left, for the sand that's still there for them to mine. Once it's done, the highest and best use then changes from a sand pit to whatever they're selling for at the time. And right now, they're selling as to developers for development into subdivisions for the larger tracts.
And what are they selling for, that 5,000-6,000 an acre?
The 46 cents a square foot.
And that's where it gets inconsistent then with the other comparables that we have, which are open water parcels. That one being in the section right next to West Shores, and there we're down in that low number in the 3,000s.
Now, some of these are actually subdivisions that have a 191 present worth factor applied to them. By statute, they have a sellout period, so we measure that absorption rate, that sellout period. So they have a fractional market value applied to them because of that. I'd have to look to see which ones those are, but those are the ones that are actually subdivisions going in. Blue Water is a prime example.
But ours were like lands descriptions, our other comparables weren't subdivisions, because wouldn't they show a platted lot if they were subdivisions?
That I don't know. I don't know.
This may be like way off, but I'm just trying to simplify things. But, and it's probably not able to, because, okay, so say for instance, there's a piece of property out on 225th, and it's commercial. We don't know what it's going to be. Its future use may be a strip mall, maybe an apartment complex, maybe, but you don't know.
Right.
So how you're not determining at that time, you're determining its use or its value based on that point in time of January 1.
Right, of comparable sales.
Of comparable sales.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So you're not taking into what their the future use of
no,
anything
I
is.
do look at the zoning. If
Yeah.
it's zone commercial, then I would try to give it a commercial rate, because that'd be the highest and best use, be most profitable as a commercial property. But if it's vacant and residentially zoned, or vacant and outside the city limits, that has a different highest and best use.
But you're not, but like with this one, unless I heard you wrong, you're assuming it's going to be a subdivision development.
No, I'm assuming it's gonna be sold to a developer, because that's what they're selling for now. They are selling to developers now.
So just
The
to
only
develop,
exception would be, there are those individuals out there that buy it for a private lake,
that what, I'm sorry,
buy it for a private lake, and then that would be residential, not commercial.
okay.
They buy the property,
Right.
and they put a house on it, and it's not developed for anybody else but them.
Okay. So I'm gonna go back to my referees, if you had any further,
Well, remember, the protests came in, and they were protested on a basis of equalization. We never got to even visit the methodology of the assessor, and they didn't protest on the methodology on evaluation side. It was purely equalization. So, as Rick was saying, when we looked at those, and they were not by our choice, but outclassed, is really why they weren't looked at in the same
okay,
manner.
but let me stop you, because
Right.
you just said, as you were looking down this list, you stopped. So even the two comparables that are really the true comparables of what should be looked at, we didn't look at those.
Well, the referee did look at those. In his comments says he did look at them, because he mentions that out of the 9, 7 of them were not applicable. But the request wasn't for 41 or 31 an acre, 32 an acre. It was for 14 an acre. So at that point in time, again, we are time constrained to some level. We've instructed the referees, they're not there to appraise property. They're there to look at the information and the arguments that are presented and go from there. You get to this round table discussion, and you can start to bring more things to the table to start to maybe even clear some things up. But we don't have that luxury.
No, and I want to clarify, this isn't to point fingers at who's doing something wrong or bad or not thoroughly enough or whatever.
I understand
I don't
that.
want anybody, you or you guys, to think that, but this is the process.
Right.
And so right now is the taxpayers' right to come before us, and for us as the Board of Equalization to dig into, even though it's hard and ugly and messy, for us to dig into how we arrived at what we arrived at, because we as a Board of Equalization may or may not agree. So we're trying to find, I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody.
And that's why I'm saying
Okay.
here is what you've got. But this discussion has been wrapped around a discounted cash flow analysis. And we as the referee and were not provided the discounted cash flow analysis prepared by the assessor's office. And there wasn't a discounted cash flow or argument on discount rates or terms or remaining years or residuals. terms and all the things that we would need to look at a discounted cash flow analysis wasn't there, which seems to be the direction that everybody's going, which I understand where the assessor's office is coming from and saying, hey, this needs to be treated and the time value of money comes into play. I haven't seen any of that. I mean, we've talked about residual value of 46 cents.
You didn't see any of that in the packets?
No.
Commissioner Kraft?
Because that should have been part of the package.
Now, I see they did check valuation-based argument. So you said they.
You're saying value? No, this was on equalization.
Okay.
The second one is equalization. The third one is both. I know this is sometimes difficult to
Okay, yeah,
follow. I think it could be reworked to make it clear for everybody, but that's another day, another story.
Okay, I got that now. And,
So then we're not looking at the
Carol?
same
Yes.
information.
were you aware of the methodology the assessor used?
We were, and
My intent was to have
we
that
didn't
worksheet
agree
plus the
with that,
information
but
we had to resolve
what
that.
we decided was kind of based on some comments that we made that anytime there would be basically a pond of water, that they would value that as a potential residential subdivision. Because we talked about the fact that we felt like we were being targeted because we were a mining operation. And they said, no, we would do that no matter what, so that's why we went with the equalization argument, because we were led to believe that that the assessor would be looking at, I mean, some of those examples I gave you, that could easily be made into a residential subdivision. You could put houses all the way around that. So that was why, I think the majority reason, Ron, you can speak to that, why we decided to go with equalization.
Okay, on an equalization basis, if you take your comparables here, the average cost per, or value per acre is $3,260. Okay. If we were to make an adjustment and use that as an equalization value, what would you say?
I think we would be willing to accept that for this tax year.
I would make a motion to do that,
Okay,
when it's appropriate to make the motion.
okay, I would go ahead and make it,
Okay, I'll make that motion
that we set their per acre cost at 3,260,
straight across the board.
straight across the board. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
And we can
Now,
discuss.
further discussion. Commissioner Duda,
You're using all the classes here, though, not just the commercial.
and she explained why.
Makes me happy.
It's been a long day.
But Carol just explained why that they were using, because
Right.
we were going on equalization based on what was said during their
I
discussions.
get that,
with
but
the-
we aren't allowed to look at other classes, or we aren't supposed to.
Commissioner Morgan?
So let me make sure the assessor's
Well,
office, I mean, we want to
even if we
listen
went
and
on
try to
just the
do the right
commercial,
thing, and
it'd be
this
bad.
is not,
I guess I would make this observation.
okay?
If the Commissioner Kraft, is your 3,200 coming from the average of those first 9 parcels?
All of them, yeah.
Okay.
So take the last two.
And I'm sorry, I mean, I may be slow today, but
Who's
were
the
the
last
first
two?
7 agricultural parcels? Well, it's a pretty thought, but you really can't
That's what
use
you just
agricultural parcels to equalize with non-agricultural.
So use the last two.
Yes, so the last two would be 30.
681.
Approximately.
Yep.
But my thought was, when I asked Jack, who determines whether it's agricultural or commercial, he said that he does. It's not a zoned as such.
No. The key
Do
is.
these have crops on it, Jack?
Would you see
a
the
little portion of
36?
No.
He said it.
That's just
No
these
problem.
two averaged
It's not
together,
ag use.
which are the only two commercials
Yeah.
on the list.
But
according to our
it
area-
started
So that's
out
fine.
as ag use.
I'm good.
It's
That's
zoned agricultural.
Just so
Because we have to come in and get a conditional use permit from the county in order to mine the property that is zoned agricultural.
And that leads into my
That's
thought
true.
process.
But when it generates income, then it's no longer ag use. So you guys do what you want, but that's not a methodology that's gonna be accepted any place at any time. It's not good sound theory. Sorry.
Hey, Jack, if we have these other properties that have open water, wouldn't you have to run a residual approach on them because they could just as well be developed into residential
Yes.
as well as
Yes,
residential?
if they're large enough for the highest and best use to be that, yes. You'd have to run a feasibility study and yes. And I don't remember if we had a cutoff on size or not, but what we looked at was only those active pits mining right now.
Yes, so you went to active as opposed to,
Anything that was generating income, we
Yeah.
used the income approach.
so if it had previously been active and had been completed,
Then we're just looking at the reversion or the sell price of that property in the future. We assume a 5-year waiting period.
and that's where we got troubled, is that one, like in the section right next to West Shores, which is a big lake development, that one is in there at 1,400 an acre. So
Yeah, I'll have to look at that to see why that's that way.
Yeah.
Because of the 191s and how they're applied, I can't answer that question directly.
Commissioner Kraft?
I recall instances where an apartment or a commercial bay is essentially empty for quite a period of time. And because they've used the income basis, it reduced the value, since there was no production of income. So wouldn't that play into a similar type on the one parcel that is not actively being mined?
I'll give you a quick answer to that. When I build an income model, I assume what's typical vacancy rate. I don't value the actuals on that type of scenario. Because you have enough data coming in that you have to take out the management part of it. And that could be management. Either raise the rates or he's not taking care of the property. I mean, there's a whole lot of factors involved.
And I
So-
understand that.
So
It's
we use
involved
a
in a
typical.
state with 36 people who can't agree on whatever.
Right.
But it's still, I've heard,
I would not make the adjustment because of the high vacancy rate. I would make the adjustment if there was some deficiency to the property that caused it, but not just because of the vacancy rate.
I don't have anything else.
Okay. Any further conversation from anybody?
Commissioner, if you wanted to do just the 2 commercial properties, that'd be 3681 an acre. Wanna go that
What are your
specific?
thoughts on that?
That if you want to use these comparables, I think you're more realistic, at least using the 2 with a similar classification.
Okay.
Using the two bottom
The
ones.
two ones that have commercial classifications by the assessor.
Which then puts you at the 36.
3681
Yeah,
instead
that's
of
just a-
3260. Okay.
Teresa, have anything she wants to say right now?
Teresa, your county attorney's office, I would just agree with Jack, and that is that you can equalize property in different classifications.
Oh, come on, you always agree with me.
I know the board is aware of that,
So if we're taking the bottom 2 that are
Right,
the commercial,
Commercial.
then we're not taking all of them.
right.
Wouldn't that be
That would
okay?
be more reasonable,
Yes.
yes, Commissioner.
That's what I wanted to try to
Commissioner Duda?
have you say.
A question on process, so I guess this is mostly for Jack. Regardless of what comes out of here today, I mean, if we do make an adjustment to this today, you know, we often get all hung up on, you'd better not change that next year because we said this is what it's worth and all this. I mean, and of course you go every year. You've got a new way, I mean, the big jumps that occurred this year with a new methodology evaluating these. Are these
We
gonna,
say it's a new methodology, but it's more of an accepted methodology.
okay, but new for this
New for
property,
these-
new to be
new
applied
for
to
this
these
county.
parcels?
Yeah.
Okay. My question is, as we try to clarify these and equalize and treat everybody similarly, are these gonna be still scrutinized next year and, fine?
Yes, because
All
I'm
right.
gonna send them out a questionnaire asking them for their production of their sand.
All right.
How deep it is, how much they sell, what they sell it for, the whole 9 yards.
Okay,
And it'll change every year because production changes.
Of course.
And I think, the thing I'd say on the assessor's office, I guess I'm speaking on behalf of them. If we do something and they see that that property, something has changed, or the market has changed, occupancy, whatever, hey, I think they should do
Bring it
something
back,
next
right.
year, and not just, hey, because we did something
Right.
the year before, leave it be.
Right.
So I wanted to do that, and will be supportive, because you have an expertise. And for us to come in the last
With all due
hours.
respect, my expertise is being ignored. So-
No, it's not being ignored. We're listening.
Okay.
We just may not totally,
Okay,
we agree,
well-
but not totally agree.
If you're gonna adjust the property, adjust it with a accepted methodology, please.
So the referee is, Mark, you have a motion on the table. Would you be acceptable to having that motion be just the commercial, so we stay within the same classification?
I don't want it, except.
You what? Don't want?
I'd rather stay with the 3280, to be very honest. It just. My way of interpreting. So, but I understand that PJ wants to change it, and he was a second, so I'm assuming by wanting to change it, he's withdrawing his second.
Well, don't assume anything.
Well, I guess just based on the recommendation from the referee and from the attorney, we would have, I think, better standing.
And if we don't do it that way, the assessor can take it to Turk, can't they?
Well, they can take it to
They can
Turk
do
over
it anyway.
anything, obviously.
I will change it to the
681. Okay. Commissioner Morgan, you had the
And
second.
I'm kind of, this is a tough one for us, or for me, but, I'm listening to the referees and what they're saying too. I mean,
That's what they're
I
saying.
respect what the assessor's office has done, and we're coming in the last hours of this, and it's a little tough to make sure we're trying to do the right thing and be fair. But do you have any comments you want to make to us? We should fill Chris in on where we are.
You're about to vote, Chris. Good luck.
Did you want to fill them in, or did you want me to respond?
Well, I can do it real quick. Chris, we had long discussions about how they arrived from how it was done before to how it's being done. Bottom line is, of the 9 properties that the taxpayer brought for use in their comparables, the first 7 aren't commercial, they're ag. So the motion and recommendation by the referee after long discussion was to use the average of those 2 bottom ones, which would put it at $3,681 per acre, that we would apply to those 4 properties listed below that, which are the Lyman Ritchie properties.
Well, is that true I didn't think that was that was the referee's recommendation, that was Mark Kraft's, because their initial recommendation was to keep it the same on the public record. So, but you're in agreement that if we're gonna use an average, only to use the 2 commercials.
Right,
That's correct.
Right.
right. So the motion now, correct me if I'm wrong, you were made
I'll
that,
agree to the
you agreed to the
3681.
3681. Does the seconder agree to the 3681?
Yes.
Any further discussion on this?
Does Chris have anything he wants to ask of us right now?
Okay.
He wants to use Burger.
And not share it?
And not share
it. There's many of us who have not had
That's
that.
right around.
A point I might
Yes.
like to make, if I may.
Yes.
There's been discussion about the classification of the property and how the classification affects whether or not it can be considered to be a comparable.
Yes.
And one of the things that Carol had brought up this morning was some litigation in Cass County. In Cass County, they did go through a process of trying to classify properties so that properties that were owned or controlled by mining companies would be the only ones that would be subject to an approach to value.
Right.
And if we think through this, we're saying it's okay to classify properties with open bodies of water that could be developed for residential development. It's okay to say that they're agricultural and we're not going to consider them to be comparables. But what you end up with is you're saying we're only going to apply this approach to value to a property if it's a mining company controlled property. Which takes you right back to what happened in Cass County. You have an approach to valuation which is driven by how it's being operated and by whom. So if Lyman Ritchie was involved in one of these other open bodies of water, would they then be subject to this income residual where they would be pegged for potential residential development? It seems like that is the case, that we're only looking to properties that have a mining company component to them, because we're looking to, well, how much sand is there? How much longer is it going to be mined? What could it potentially be developed for 20 or 25 years from now? But we're only looking at those properties if a mining company's involved. If somebody else owns them and they could just as easily be developed into a lakeside residential development, they don't appear to be subject to the same valuation approach.
What?
I was talking to myself.
Oh.
Just a point that bears on the analysis.
Well, and in response, I think we would just make the observation that once that use starts to change, you may need to value properties differently. I don't think they were done with respect to who owns them, but in terms of how they are used.
But that becomes the result.
Right. Okay. Any other comments? There's a motion and a second. Motion by Commissioner Kraft, seconded by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
Sure.
Or roll call.
Commissioner Boyle, Commissioner Kavanaugh, Commissioner Duda.
I like that when we all voted at the same time. Definitely going first. Yes.
Commissioner Kraft,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers,
Just a minute, he's finished his
and Commissioner Borges.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right.
Move to adjourn. That was our one item, wasn't it?
Yes, it was our one item.
Good.
Can I second that?
Thanks. Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in
We're outta
favor to
here.
adjourn,
Can
say
we-
aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, everyone.
Larry.
Thank you all for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Signed off. I just, yeah, the referees and the assessor were both saying the same thing. I don't like taking a different tack, you know.
Wednesday, 10 a.m.